Sometimes it was crystal clear, other times it was murky. But no matter how Tim Green's recollection of that night ended up, it always started the same, at Kensington and Allegheny. After hours near the Philadelphia street corner known as K&A, prostitutes, addicts, and dealers fought tooth and nail for survival. Tricks were turned, deals were made, and sunrise brought dead bodies. After that, the night returned and the game would start again. Tim knew the game well. He played it more often than most, yet somehow, he was still alive. Like the other suburban 20-somethings who'd come to Philly in search of heroin, Tim had discovered his own private hell, and he'd found it inside himself. With drooping blue eyes and brown dusty hair, he looked like an unkempt boy, but Tim was a hardcore drug addict who would die for a vein full of dope. Once when he robbed a hooker for $10, an angry pimp broke Tim's jaw. Another time, a dealer shot him in the leg for stealing 5 bags from his stash. A year before, he contracted a virus through the point of the wrong shared needle, but despite everything he'd been through for heroin, Tim had managed to survive. By the time he reached that chaotic evening in June 2008, however, survival wasn't enough anymore. After 2 years of watching women turn tricks under the L tracks and men turn to zombies under the influence, Tim didn't care if he lived or died. He just wanted to fill his needle. The night began with Tim doing the same thing he did every evening, sitting on the steps of a boarded-up house and watching the avenue move. This night was different, though. He saw more than the usual preening prostitutes and dead-eyed addicts. He saw opportunity. As he scratched his face absently and pretended to nod, his eyes were fixed on a man across the street. That man didn't belong at K&A. Tim knew that, so he waited for him to walk inside a bar. Then Tim got up and crossed the avenue, hoping he would somehow get $10 for another bag of dope. The bar was dark when Tim walked in, so he waited for his eyes to adjust. When they did, he saw scantily clad women and a bartender with one hand beneath the counter. He saw patrons who rarely left their bar stools. Then he looked at the man he'd followed inside, and Tim knew he'd made a mistake. The man was 6'2" and husky, with a plain black suit, a square jaw, and a hard stare. His hair was close cropped and squared off above the collar. In a room full of criminals, he was watchful, but not afraid, all of which could mean only one thing. The guy was a cop. Tim could see that now, and while he didn't know Officer John Harris's name at that moment, the name would come to dominate what was left of Tim's life. "Drinks on me!" Officer Harris shouted while tossing a stack of bills onto the bar. 2 women plopped down on Harris's lap. He pawed them and lit a cigar, and as liquor flowed and people laughed, nearly every eye watched John Harris. Then Tim noticed a barmaid whose attention was elsewhere, and he knew something wasn't quite right. When Tim turned around to see what she was watching, a thin man walked quickly past him. With one hand, he was pulling a mask over his face. With the other, he was pulling out a gun. With eyes stretched wide, the bartender tried to grab his shotgun from beneath the bar, but the gunman shot him in the head. As blood spattered and chaos erupted, the barmaid screamed. Customers hit the floor. Officer Harris tried to turn while pulling his gun. Then a bullet tore into his midsection. The cop tumbled from his bar stool and landed on the floor as blood spilled from his gut. He tried to level his gun to shoot, but the gunman never gave him a chance. Standing over John Harris like an executioner, he pulled the trigger once again. Then he walked out as people ran and screamed in the chaos and fear that followed. Whenever Tim thought back to that moment, he remembered 3 things. The barmaid staring into his eyes, the cop's money falling onto the floor, and the feeling that he might have hit the jackpot after all. As everyone panicked and ran for the door, Tim scurried to the dying cop's side. Quickly, he scooped up the bills and left the bar. 15 minutes later, he was nodding in a filthy back alley, with a needle in his arm and a fistful of bloody 20s. The cops that found him kept asking where he got the money. Tim didn't answer, and they beat him unconscious. When he woke up, he was in prison. That was all Tim could recall about that night, so that's what he told his lawyer when she asked him about it. He liked his lawyer. Her name was Andrea Wilson. She was beautiful and smart. She knew more about K&A than he gave her credit for, and she'd agreed to represent him for free. But Tim didn't tell Andrea everything. He didn't think he needed to. She should have seen that his eyes were lifeless. She should have known he didn't care about his defense. She should have sensed that something was wrong. Even Tim Green, in his drug-addled state, understood hopelessness when he saw it. He knew that Officer Harris's murder was the start of a journey through hell. His lawyer would soon know it too. So that's the football. That's Tim Green.